So why don't we have, here we go, Todd, let's, upside down. Okay. Why don't we have our three panelists come forth and take a seat up there, grab a microphone. So our first session is on three really topical topics, right? We've got personalization, retargeting, and attribution, all enabled by digital analytics. I'm going to do a quick intro. I just met these three gentlemen in the lobby outside, but Brian on your right is Associate Vice President of Analytics at Visual IQ, responsible for helping clients understand how to leverage attribution to measure and optimize cross-channel marketing performance. Before joining Visual IQ, Brian was at Omnicon's flagship media agency, OMD, where he started and ran the West Coast Analytics Department, as well as managed relationships with multiple tech vendors. And then in the middle, we've got Tom Hubbard, Vice President, Global Head of Digital Marketing for Kaspersky Lab. In this role, he's responsible for all global digital marketing activities, including digital media, SEO, web optimization, publishing, and many other activities, formerly at 8 years at Havas Agencies. And then on your left, we've got Richard Shea. Rich is CTO and co-founder of YieldBot. YieldBot has a real-time, provides the web's leading real-time consumer intent marketplace. Prior to YieldBot, Rich was on the founding teams and engineering leadership roles at Blue Note Networks, Wavesmith Networks, and New Oak Communications. So welcome to our three panelists, and thank you for your time this afternoon. So covering three really rich topics in about 45 minutes may be a challenge, but I want to do some real-time market research. I'm going to ask the audience to vote for which topic is of most interest to you, and I've got questions that span all three, and I'm sure you do as well. But let's start there. So for people, show of hands, who are most interested in this discussion on personalization. Okay, we got some there. How about retargeting? A little fewer there. And how about attribution? Okay, so quick math shows attribution, personalization, and retargeting. Great. All right. As I mentioned, I've got plenty of questions, but this event is really for you, our audience members. So don't hesitate to. We'll have some time at the end, but I'd like to have real-time questions, as I think these folks would as well. So if you want clarification on a point, or want to delve deeper into something, or shift the conversation another direction, don't hesitate to do that. And show of hands, how many were at our event? I guess it's now what, two and a half years ago? Couple folks. So we had some really good, I'll call it even fireworks at some of our panel sessions. So don't hesitate to throw a Molotov cocktail out there and see how these guys how they handle it. They handle questions like these on a daily basis, so we shouldn't let them get off the hook here easily today. All right, so I'm going to start with a quick definition. So attribution, I found online, is the measurement of the value of each digital marketing contact that contributed to a desired outcome. So that makes some sense to me. My first question for these folks is, first of all, why should companies pursue this? What is kind of the business value of attribution? What tangible success have you seen either employing that yourself at a kind of client side or on the vendor or agency side? What are some real tangible results that you've seen with the attribution technology or capability? So who wants to take that one as a start? Brian?
I'll take that one. So what's the value? I guess the first question is, what's the value of attribution? Yeah. And kind of so actually something I'm going to add a little bit to Scott's definition of attribution. Attribution is a new buzzword that a lot of people have been using, especially in the past few years. It's really associated with more rules-based or modeled attribution. But if you really think about in that general broad sense, the way that he had defined it, everybody's been doing attribution for a long time. Not very good attribution. Last ad, maybe feeling what it's like, there's always some sense of attribution. And really the value of it is to understand, the premise of attribution in general is to understand where you're spending your money and how is that driving your business. So kind of the way that I broke it out with the rules-based, or the, for lack of a better term, less sophisticated attribution, shifting into more sophisticated models helps you actually better understand and evaluate those things. If you're kind of using your gut feel or a rules-based model, which can be arbitrary or last ad, you're associating credit to things that may not be that valuable, but you're making decisions off of them. So I think shifting over to something that's a little bit more data-driven and actually helps you understand what's actually driving your business is kind of that key advantage and that key premise of why you would use a more sophisticated, again, what people are calling attribution today. From a value perspective, we've seen, obviously Visual IQ being an attribution company, we've seen tons and tons of use cases where people have seen 10, 20, 30% increases in volume, in revenue, profit, and efficiency. So I think there's a huge value proposition because if you think about, again, measurement and having a rough estimate of what's valuable, it's going to give you more conversions. Having a more precise understanding of what's really driving that is going to give you better accuracy, the ability to kind of trim the fat, as we would call it at Visual IQ, as well as double down in all the investments that are helping drive your business.
So I would agree on the tracking part is important. So just a question from the audience: how many people are involved in digital media in some form or fashion, whether it's running it, okay. So I think the thing for me that I find humorous is people talk about, do we do attribution or not? You're doing it today. You're just doing it wrong. Well, I don't mean to offend everybody, but if we're doing last click, which I did for many years, I think we would all agree it's wrong, right? But we tend to do it. So for me, what we call attribution are just platforms that help us do a smarter fractional attribution of those. So for me, it's not a, do you do attribution or not? It's, is the current attribution that you're doing correct, or do you believe it's incorrect and that there is another option there? For us, since we launched 2 years ago, we've had a 20% increase in media ROI, and I think that's where you're going to see the biggest impact right away. You're going to be much smarter about making media decisions, and ultimately, if that's where a lot of your dollars are going, that's where you're going to get the impact. So I think the tracking part is a very important part. The other part that we use it for, that I think, again, I would guess everybody in this room does some form of planning for the future, that we use that for making decisions from where our budgets go within channels. We make decisions on whether our campaigns worked or not. Do we continue campaigns? So there's a kind of a forward-looking analysis that happens. And I would say the third part is really the marketing insight. So one of the things that we've gotten over the past 2 years is a much better understanding of how customers flow through the sales funnel, and from that, how we make marketing decisions. So to use an example, when we first pulled our data on attribution, we were able to look back 90 days. One of the first things we saw was the assumptions we made for how we built consumer marketing campaigns were mostly wrong. How we thought somebody went from hearing about Kaspersky to actually buying a product was radically different from what we thought it was. And that was a little bit of a wake-up call for us. It's good because now we know this and now we can update it. But we've overhauled everything from how a campaign is structured to even what we expect out of a landing page. So I think those are really the big areas. And again, I mentioned the number for us. Proof is in the ROI, and we've seen a very strong 20% increase. And my hope is with Brian and other people's help on this, because we work with Visual IQ, we can actually push that a little bit further. And for us, we started in North America, but actually now we're starting on a path to actually roll this out globally in 20 countries. So we've really seen the impact, but to the point where we're getting the ROI, we can justify continued investment and expansion into other countries.
It was maybe to echo some of that, but from our point of view, so we create a marketplace. We have direct relationships with advertisers and publishers. We're integrated on the publisher sites like an analytics product, but we're really using the analytics for our own insights to do our own optimized ad serving. And so something that I've seen recently that I think is interesting with regard to attribution is kind of a push from the agencies to be able to keep track and give us basically partial credit for when we're not the last click, but when we've delivered something relevant in the past, and then someone goes and buys something later. And From our perspective, what's interesting about that is like we end up getting more money because of that, and the agencies are really pushing, really push us in the direction of doing that. Versus when we started, we were really, oriented towards, put very, very much, and still are very much real time, closed loop, being able to, serve the most relevant ad at that time. But it's interesting, sort of this longer tail of attribution that is really. Opens up another really flow of money into our pockets, I guess.
If we thought about attribution kind of on a maturity curve, where do you think most folks are today, and what's next for them if they wanted to continue to advance and evolve in that space, and what would be some of the things they need to think about to get there? Sure.
So obviously, there's a little bit of bias in my response going to be there, but I guess from an overall maturity perspective, obviously when we talked about the last ad, kind of all the rules-based models, if we're just talking data-driven models, the overall space I think is still really much in its nascency. A lot of people have been talking about it, interested in hearing about it. We have obviously a lot of prospects that we talk to. And even the clients that we work with, we're helping them understand, but a lot of them want to kind of start off dipping their toe into the water. But attribution is one of those things where it requires a big chunk of your media spend to understand, to measure a big chunk of your media spend, as Tom mentioned, to really understand what's going on, because all of these things are interplaying. So I guess from a maturity perspective, we're still in the nascency. What people can do, obviously, can go to Visual IQ's website, can come to our booth afterwards. But I think there's a wealth of other information online, Forrester, and there's a bunch of other places where you can find some details on what people are doing, how people are thinking about attribution, how much they're picking it up.
Yeah, so just one comment you made was dipping your toe. There is no dipping your toe in that. You're either in or you're out. It's jumping into the deep end. But I think that sounds scary, and I think it paralyzes a lot of organizations that get afraid of making the change. But I've talked to a lot of people that have gone through this process, deployed a platform. I've yet to hear one person regret it. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It's not perfect for us. We have our own internal challenges around the data, but I think for what type of company is ready for it, if you have media at considerable weight in multiple channels, you need to start looking at this. Period. I don't think there's really any other qualification. If you're trying to figure out how different marketing channels are working, these are the types of platforms that are going to help answer that. From years of doing this, I know that I kind of have for my own personal career, I guess, as a pre and post attribution. And, I've played around with, like D2C and some other, fairly rudimentary platforms in the past, but really, I view pre-attribution really go into an algorithmic attribution and then post. And I'm not really sure how I did my job and my teams did their job before we had this data. I almost horrified at some of the decisions we made because they must have just been so wrong. Because what we saw when the data came through, a lot of the things that we thought were working based on the data that we had. So we weren't doing anything wrong. We're reading the reports that we have. We're so far off from reality, it was a little bit scary. But I would say, for anybody in the audience or anybody, that's out there, if you have multiple channels and you have significant weight behind them where you can get an ROI for the implementation of a platform, you need to be moving forward now. And I think that the category is, steal something from, Manu's kind of interview you had, is really entering the early majority right now. You're kind of coming out of the early adopter. Now you have still kind of leading edge. The whole, most companies are not at the point where they're going to invest in that. But I would say that it's a mistake not to explore it seriously. And that doesn't mean that every company can afford, certain level of investment, whether it's in people that you need to support there, what have you, but do something would be my recommendation. And I think anybody that's still operating in a last click model, I think we all know that's flawed. So, it's our job to move past that.
Yeah, on the age of the market, I would, or the technology, looking at it from a technology point of view, I definitely, agree with Brian. It's in the early stages. I think there's lots of challenges around, collecting the information and being able to, from different channels and bring it all together. And like, when I look at it, that's something that I see as a very big challenge, like how to consistently, track a user across, different silos of ways that they interact with a brand or product.
So just to clarify a little bit, I guess I wasn't talking as much from the technology perspective. I was thinking more from an industry adoption perspective. It's still in the early part. I think one other, pitfall or things to look out for is and Tom alluded to this a little bit, is thinking it's just about the platform and the technology. You need an organization that's ready to act on it. There are a lot of places in media right now where there's a lot of what I would call vertical specialization, whether it's paid search, display, web analytics, email, and to Tom's point, based on the data that people had at the time, that made a lot of sense. And that's how people are structured. That's how organizations are structured. Maybe that's how your agency or the agencies you work with are structured. But when you start thinking about attribution, and it breaks down a lot of those barriers, a lot of the things that you used to do just don't make sense anymore. If you're looking at a cross-channel platform, does it make sense to have this clear delineation between the paid search guy never ever talking to the display person and never talking to the email? There's a whole bunch of change management and internal considerations about how you look at your business and how you want people to think and operate. That also needs to be considered. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle that we're noticing a lot is organizations want to do it, especially there are key people like Tom and other folks that are clients that are really interested, understand, are as passionate about it as he is, and know that last click is not right, but the organization is not ready. So there's some kind of groundwork and tilling the soil, if you would, that's also required to take this right.
I could not agree more. For us, the easiest phase of this was implementation. That was a breeze. We thought, and we kind of went in a little bit naive, so we had, I really felt that if we didn't have buy-in across various stakeholder groups, it was going to be a mistake, and I would still agree with that. And I worked through that. So before we actually moved forward, we had unanimous agreement on not only that we're moving in this direction, but down to the platform we're going to choose, how we're going to track things, everything. The second we went live, and really the moment we started getting data back in is when reality hit. And you have situations where we have channels that are performing really well that now are not performing really well. And you can say in advance, oh, this is what we're going to expect this, and we're going to deal with it, and we're going to come through as a team. But there's people involved. And when you're talking to an individual that's managing a program that for years thinks that they have this really successful program, and then you give them data that says, hey, now remember this data that you agreed that we were going to utilize? It actually says that your program doesn't have a positive ROI when you start pulling your money back. Well, that's a very different situation. And now you're dealing with humans. So the change management part, by far, is the most difficult thing. And I think the hardest for me, the platforms, those are the internal challenges you face are by far the hardest. And we're 2 years in, we're still working through some things. And I don't think we'll ever finish. The reality is we're in a much better place than we were 2 years ago. We'll be in a much better place a year from now than we are today. It's going to be a constant evolution. But, we kind of had this view. We knew it was going to be a little bit of a challenge to operationalize the data. But we kind of really pat ourselves on the back when we launched, and we did it really fast. We did it in about 3 months, and we had all our channels, and we were like, this is fantastic. We did a great job, and now all our problems are going to go away. Nope. They just absolutely just started. Now, there are good discussions that you have. You get into, do we fund this? Do we fund that? Where do we put this money? If we do this, what happens here? So it's the right types of discussions. But, at the end of the day, the platform is really giving you data. But you still need to make decisions yourself and with your teams. You need to deal with kind of internal politics in various places. And even down to, for us, finance. Because we had different groups with different, fundings for programs. We're trying to move money from one to the other. Now our finance team is involved, and how are we going to handle this with POs and working with agencies? So all that stuff really started once we were live. But I would agree with the point that the change management side, I think, is the biggest item to plan for. I don't think you're going to go into it being able to nail it and say, I'm going to have this all figured out. But you'll have you have to understand that is going to be where a lot of your time is going to go moving forward. Sorry, was there a question? Sure. Yeah, so well, you need a team that's willing to work very closely together, which we're lucky that we do have. That I'm not sure, and I've talked to a lot of other companies that have implemented this where teams really don't talk to each other at all, and that's really a very different challenge. At least we have people that will sit in the same room and talk to each other and help with that. I would say the one best practice I would say is follow the money. Follow the money. So one thing we did. We have two different agencies that run media for us. One of them came on board after we had launched. The other has been working with us for many years. The one that came on board after we launched, we wrote into the contract that they would get a certain percentage of what we paid them would be based upon their results as measured by Visual IQ, our attribution platform. And there would be a bonus if they hit it, and there would be a rebate back to us if they didn't hit those numbers. The other agency, we don't have that. We have a legacy contract. There's never been any change. The agency that has the contract tied to performance is so much further along in optimization than the other because they have money on the line. So I would take that even further, if I had the power to do this, and would have people's, quarterly or annual bonuses tied to performance in it. I think ultimately, that's where you start to see change is when you're really tying performance evaluations, both internally and externally, to the results of this data. Where we've been able to do that, we see a lot more success than where we haven't been able to do it. Now, that's a tall order, and if I could do that, I'd do it, but I can't. Because it deals, it's a little bit above my pay grade to modify people's pay structure around the organization. They usually don't let digital marketing people do that. But that's really the big thing. I think I'm not sure beyond that. I would say here's 5 best practices. If you do that, you're fine. I think ultimately it's the team has to work very closely together and be agreed on what the goals are and where they want to move forward. Even then, and our team is. I mean, everybody's 100% on the same page as far as what the objectives are, how we want to use our money, what we're expecting to get out of it. But you still have that challenge of, let's move money from here to here, or we want to do this or that. It's just, I think people get involved at a certain point, and that's where the struggle goes. But yeah, if I had 5 easy, just do these things, I would just write a book and I'd be on a boat out there. But sorry.
Okay, we've got a question in the back.
I would say those 2 things are really areas I would focus on.
Talk about how attribution any examples of
Go ahead.
I think that's it falls in line with kind of what Tom was saying. Follow the money. The way I would maybe even think about that, what's the motivation? Someone's individual. We have some clients where their bonuses are predicated on their last ad numbers. It's very hard to convince somebody to switch over to using attribution if that's the case. Similarly, if your agencies are there's some common models or percent of media spend. So if you're switching dollars between agencies, that becomes a people issue, if you would. And that trickles down all the way down to the publishers as well. The publishers, they have a lot of their own technology, their own tags that they're using to measure, to try to calibrate themselves to hit whatever your goals are. One of the big things that Visual IQ is doing is trying to establish a lot of partnerships to disseminate a lot of that data out to different publishers, so that on a real-time basis, daily, weekly, whatever that is, we're able to tell the publisher how we were going to measure them and how we are measuring them, and that allows them to calibrate. This is actually compared to what's maybe business as usual or a last ad perspective. If you think about it, when the publishers ask you to put tags on their site, they're actually trying to create their own mini last ad model so they can optimize against that. So rather than using their mini last ad model, your ad server's last ad model, or anything else, you can kind of go straight to the source and have the true metrics or the attributed metrics going out to all the publishers, so everybody's aligned. Everybody knows exactly how they're being measured and how they're going to be compensated, and that cuts out a lot of the discussion or the conversations in between that takes time to align or things like that.
Yeah, so we make anybody that works with us down to a publisher level understands that is how we're going to judge their performance, and if they want more money, they're going to have to perform against that. So again, we pass data back into the publishers. because we don't want them optimizing to last click or last impression, and we make it very clear to them that if they do that, they will just lose money because that's not how we're going to value or evaluate their program. So for us, it's both at kind of agencies and then whoever they're working at a publisher level it is made very clear to them that how we will judge it and then how our future funding will be determined is on that data and not any other report they're going to send us or any data that they want. So we kind of put it back on them to make their better decisions based upon the data that we're willing to give them. But it's not my responsibility to figure out how an ad ops team at a publisher optimizes towards the data I want them to. It's my job to make sure that everybody understands where it's going, and then I'm going to move money to who's going to perform the best.
All right, last question that I have before we move on is, so if I was managing an attribution program, I would think something that might keep me up at night would be, I know you mentioned some pretty solid gains in either efficiency or ad spend. Is it realistic to expect that that's going to continue for a long time, or is that, would some point of diminishing returns kick in? Is that to be expected, or how do you, either as a vendor or a customer or somebody in that space, how do you think about that in terms of attribution from a long-term ability to have a business impact?
Sure. Well, from the perspective, so to answer your question, then I'll give you a perspective from the client side on this. But yes, it'll lower. I mean, you're going to get your biggest bang. You'll see it immediately, your opportunities, but then you have to get yourself organized around it and actually make the changes. But our expectation is that over time we will see the month over month optimization percentage go down. But of course, we have the historical ones to back up, so it's still a good thing. But I actually view that as a good thing because I want us to do less optimization and more thinking and planning about new opportunities. So one of the things that we're able to do is actually see what our ceiling is within the tool. So if we optimized, the heck out of every single thing we do, what's our maximum kind of revenue that we can expect? Well, if I want to get beyond that in a given month or a given quarter or a given year, I know that we need to have new ideas and new activities. And that's really where the value is going to be, that it limits the amount of time we have to spend on optimizing, limit the amount of time we have to spend on, reporting and these activities that really don't drive your business forward. I mean, it helps it move forward, but in a single digit standpoint or low double. But if you want to get to a 30, 40, 50, 60% increase in your business over the next couple of years, you need new ideas and to bring in kind of new thinking, not just optimize the things you're doing today. So yes, we expect that. We would welcome it. I would love to get a point where every month there's the platform saying you have optimized the heck out of everything and you got nothing left to do. Perfect. Now we can put 100% of our resources on thinking about what are the new activities, new campaigns, new ideas that we can help to move the business forward.
I guess one other thing. So I think the way that Tom spoke about it is kind of the growth in their business. A lot of other advertisers thinking about what's the increased impact I'm getting versus what I was doing before. So to know what you got a 20% lift, you need to be running what was not using attribution or have some sort of baseline or comparison. So a lot of the times it's a 20% lift over what they were doing last month, because last month they were doing attribution, and maybe this next month over month it's 1%, 2%, 10%, depending on their media spend. So the lift and using attribution is going to continue to help you gain and capitalize on that. The degree of that lift is really dependent upon if you want to run a test that shows what your baseline would have been. I don't suggest doing that. It's kind of, why would you purposely spend money on something that is not going to perform as well if you have data against it? So often what we do talk about is kind of what Tom was mentioning is now that you're using attribution as your system of record and this is the norm for you, how do you just continue to grow your media strategy as opposed to scrutinizing what the lift could have been or should have been or something like that?
Great. All right. So I think our second place winner in terms of topic of interest was personalization. Quick definition here to get us all on the same page. Personalization is the dynamic insertion, customization, or suggestion of content in any format that is relevant to the individual user based on their implicit behavior, preferences, and explicitly given details. So a couple similar questions here, but one that I'm going to add on because I think it's most applicable to this one. So let's talk again about where companies are today typically and where they're headed to and how they get to, but also in your comments, can you add in, which you guys did on your own for the first topic, but are there risks, kind of gotchas, are there downsides to this technology, this capability, or going too far in this space, either that you've seen directly or indirectly in the marketplace?
So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think personalization from our perspective is about relevance. So specifically, our technology is looking in real time against the analytics that we have from what we've seen in the past. We're not tracking users across sites, but we're looking to serve the so in terms of dynamic content. In our case, it's primarily ad content, and we're measured by performance. There's attribution coming in now. We're also looking at doing like looking at trending content on the site, and specifically with regard to being of interest to what the user is looking at on the page that they're on, and what their session has been that we're seeing. I think that in terms of going to the I think from a maturity point of view, I think it's kind of early. You see a lot of recommendations that really don't hit the mark. I think our technology is in a good, unique space because of the way we're integrated onto the publisher sites. We have good first-party data. We're looking at the whole session, and we know what they're interested on that site. So when we give recommendations, we can look at I think that it's a closed loop system where we're also seeing what are people actually interacting with. I think that's interesting from an analytics point of view for ad serving, is that not only are we using our analytics to determine what to serve, but then we're seeing what is the actual engagement and how does that drive what we're going to serve in the future. So it's really a closed loop and not just kind of a reporting of the information, the intent that's on the site.
So for us, I think we do more on the B2B side than the B2C. We're a little sensitive to personal information given the nature of what we set out to do, which is to protect people and their data information. So we take that very, very seriously. But on the B2B side, where it's lead generation model, we have a fairly robust lead nurturing process, and that's where someone's actually giving us information that we can openly giving us information that we can use to make the conversation better. So if somebody comes in and they're very interested in mobile device management, I don't want to be talking to them about endpoint security for a server. It's really doesn't make a lot of sense. So a lot of the content distribution that we do on the B2B side of our business is driven by what people have indicated that they want to learn about, their response to various communications and the content they're actually openly engaging with us with. But I think if your question about the maturity of personalization in general, I think it's probably an interesting topic because we've been talking about one-to-one marketing for many years, and I think it still feels like it's at the beginning to me, even though it's 20 or you can go back to direct mail is basically an attempt at one-to-one marketing. I'm not sure how quickly it changes from where we are today. I think there's a lot of concern about personal privacy and data, and particularly I deal with Europe a lot, and in Europe it's very, very challenging. What data you can use, what data you're allowed to execute on is very limiting compared to what you have in the U.S. So building kind of a global plan, also you have to figure out whether you bring it down the lowest common denominator that allows you to kind of execute globally, or do you execute regionally based upon various data laws. So again, I think personalization will be a topic 50 years from now. I don't think I'm not sure where it sits in whatever you want to map out a cycle. But yeah, for us, where it is really primarily focused on making sure that if you're talking to us, that we're smart about that, that we're not doing anything creepy or anything like that. Because again, that's part of our job is actually to protect people and their data and their privacy through our products. So the last thing we're going to do is violate that from a marketing standpoint. That would not be acceptable to our company.
I guess from personalization, I think it's actually really, really mature. I think the way people think about it, how it's being used, sorry, the way people think about it, at least how it's being used, that kind of varies month to month, year to year, depending on what field you're in. I mean, if you think about Facebook news feeds, Twitter, there's personalization in that. The articles that people share with you, it's not always what people are sharing with you. It's what people share with you that Facebook deems that somebody of your demographic will probably like as well. There's the ads, the publisher side kind of component to it, where when someone visits a site, what ad do you want to show them, which advertiser, and then it kind of goes down to the creative personalization, which I'm sure some people have dealt with as well, which is dynamically building creative kind of on the spot. So should it be this color? Should I show the image of the male, of the female, the shoes, the bag, whatever that is? So there's this whole gamut and spectrum there. I think the fellow panelists spoke a lot about some of the other things. I guess the part that sticks out most to me in terms of something to watch out for is trying to do too much. I've worked with some dynamic creative vendors before. They gave me 100,000 different combinations of creative. How are you ever going to get sample size on 100 if you have 100,000 different things that you're trying to compare? We serve like 1 million impressions and 100,000 different variations. I have absolutely no data at all to tell me which one was better. They all look to exactly perform the same. So what does this provide for me? What kind of value is there? So when you start extrapolating that a little further and thinking from a publisher perspective, from an audience perspective, how can I cluster these things? One-to-one is a great concept, but it's very difficult to execute because rarely are you ever going to get enough information, statistically significant or anything like that, to make some sort of predictive decision. It's usually like hand raisers is the best kind of one-to-one information. Everything else, you need some clustering. And I think that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls that you would want to look out for when you're thinking about personalization.
Any audience questions on this topic? Over here.
I guess I'll answer that with a question. Have you figured out how to track somebody across devices? And if so, can we talk after the session? No. Yeah, I mean, for me, that I would love to do that. I mean, we have products that protect, multi-device products that protect it, so we know people are using it. But the reality is, you can't track somebody across it at scale. And where we've tried to even launch a campaign to individuals, I mean, it's just not. You just can't scale it. I mean, the reach is so small; it's not even worth your. We have a limited amount of time internally. So, I mean, the idea of forget about personalization. The idea of just knowing that it's the same person, I make sure I'm delivering the same message to them across, would be a huge win right now. To get even beyond that and do personalized messaging across each would be great. But I'll start with the first one first. So.
Yeah. Back off of personalization and go to relevance, then like for us, it's not actually important whether it's the same user who was on their desktop during the day and on their iPad at night or whatever, because we're looking in real time, like what is the most relevant thing like at that time. So for me, like personalization, like literally knowing it's you on that, isn't something that we're tracking like one-to-one. But I think we are actually making really good inferences on what's relevant in both cases, and at least in our context, that's the most important thing.
Well, I mean, it's still important for us. Very important for our entire category. It's still where the majority, from the consumer side, that's where the majority of the money is. I mean, vast majority of the money. So until that changes, it will be very important for everybody else. I'm not sure what that answer is. I'm sure it depends on what your product are was. Yeah, but I mean, for us, it's we know that shipments of PCs are flat. we know tablets skyrocket, everything else, but the reality is the core bread and butter of the industry is still protecting, laptops, desktops, those machines. That's where a lot of the revenue, because that's what people pay to protect, consumers. On the business side, it's a very different story where they need to protect anything. If you're an IT security manager, you need to protect any device that anybody has, because that's an entryway into your system. But on the for us on the consumer side, I mean that family computer is still important because that's what people are willing to pay money for a license to protect.
From our perspective too, the more you narrow into real time, then the less important it becomes, even that it's the same device over time. So because only one user is actually using that device at any one time. So if it's about the session that you're in, like I would say is 99% of it for us, like really looking at real time, then it doesn't matter that it's a shared device. We're not looking to correlate. Well, for one, we don't correlate across sites, but we also do very little correlation across sessions. Like it's really our thesis is that what's important for performance and relevance is what are the signals that we're seeing like in that session at that time, and that's what has driven our performance and done well. And so we haven't particularly worried about that.
There's another question back there. Yeah. Again, I'll give you an answer from our experience. So I would agree with you on the consumer side. So consumer targeting, and maybe the reasons for what Brian mentioned, that to do it at scale is very difficult. But I would actually argue with that point on the B2B side, because I think anybody that's deployed a marketing automation tool and that is really invested into it, you are absolutely going to see positive results of that. And that's really, that whole marketing automation is all about setting up business rules that help you with personalization, timing, cadence, governance, and so forth. We use Marketo for that. We've definitely seen a strong increase in the performance. So, but then you're dealing with a smaller audience number, right, and a much longer sales cycle. That's much more considered purchase. I think in that model, we've definitely seen success. Maybe in the consumer side, we have to act so fast, like the time to purchase is it's a very narrow window. You just don't have the time to build a kind of a cadence of that personalized messaging. You really have a couple shots to get somebody to buy, and maybe that's what the difference is. But I would say, I'm sure for a lot of companies that have implemented, marketing automation, something similar B2B side, I'm guessing they're going to see some positive improvements with, personalized messaging, or at least customizing the content you're delivering based upon what somebody's done previously. So.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more as well. I think the way you're framing it is data integration is difficult. It's as Tom experienced in a lot of other places, data integration is not that difficult, but data management. So how much leakage is there? How much do I want to allow other people to have access to this information? That's usually what causes a lot of these barriers. You see a lot of organizations with huge data stacks that have all the information, and it's kind of a walled garden. Facebook, Google, they're all starting to build some of these things. And when you start thinking about your own organization, how much do you want other people to have access to that? Probably 5 years ago, DSPs were coming out saying, "I'll integrate all of your first-party data for you. It all lives within my stack, though." And advertisers have really gone away from that because of all the privacy concerns. So I think as that kind of plays itself out over the next few years, over legislation and just fear of bad PR, things like personalization and data democracy, if you would be a lot easier to handle. I think some of the other vendors here, tag management players or DMPs, they can help in certain areas. There are a lot. I think every DSP today offers a privately managed DMP as well. So those are some other ways that you can try to get around that.
But I would say it's definitely data integration is not easy. So I think there's a lot of companies that have figured it out, but if you don't have that, you're nowhere. Forget it, right? So that is, I think you were right in that is a first step. And I would say for us, and we run into those challenges where we have siloed data. I think that the challenges of doing it right go well. Like that's the first step, but I think it goes well beyond that. But I would say, I mean, again, coming from a client standpoint, I think one of the challenges we have is it seems that every few months there's kind of another stack of data that's getting spun up, and it's a question of how are we going to integrate that with our current data. How are we going to either pull that in, or how are we going to feed data into that? We do that a lot. I mentioned what we do with marketing automation. We deal with that now, which is how do we kind of people we work on the B2B media side, how do we make sure they understand what we're doing there? We've kind of solved that on the B2C side because from Visual IQ, we're kind of feeding that data back to the different publishers and partners. But from a personalization standpoint, I mean, again, I come from a company and an industry where you have to be very careful about data. To have third parties kind of pulling it in from our systems, that's a very, very tough topic for us, and we're very, very, very conservative in how we approach situations like that.
All right, with that, we'll wrap it up. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I want to show our appreciation again for our panelists today.